Hello?
Yeah, it's me. Listen, I want to apologize for hanging up on you so abruptly. I agree that was a little bit rude, and I apologize. But please understand that I'm rather fed up with the tactics that evolutionists play in these games that they play. And allow me to point out one thing to you.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that we need to provide sources for everything that we talk about, here's why it will never work in a debate, and we'll never get anywhere in a debate with it. Now, I'll show you why. This is why scientists, when they debate, they don't play that. They don't use, what's your source for that? What's your source for that? What's your source for that? I'll give you an example of why. Okay, let us say we're debating geology, and you state to me that the mountains of the earth were formed by sedimentary strata that were subducted into the earth, buried upon with other strata, and then the strata at the bottom were deformed by heat and pressure, and then because of plate tectonics, pushed up out of the earth to form the mountains that we see today. If we wanted to play this source war, I could stop you in the middle of, or at the end of that sentence, rather. I could ask you for so many sources we wouldn't get anywhere, because I could ask you, what is your source that any particular location of the earth has been subducted and covered with additional strata? Okay. Then what is your source that demonstrates that the strata in which fossils are found, which were created by water, were deformed by heat and pressure, which somehow could not have and would not have deformed the fossils that are therein? What is your source that demonstrates that the mountains would not have been, the folded strata of them would not have been crushed and broken into pieces? Not just broken and shifted, because we see that all the time. I'm talking about crumbled and destroyed while the mountain was being slowly pushed up out of the earth. You see, I could ask you for at least 3 or 4 sources for every single assertion you make. How would we ever get anywhere when it took you all this time to try to dig around and find sources for one single statement that you make, assertion you make? See, if we did this back and forth with each other, we would bury each other in this requirement for sources for everything, and the conversation would come to a grinding halt, like slamming the brakes on an 18-wheeler on the highway. It would not get anywhere. We would not be able to say anything. Neither one of us would be able to posit anything. Neither one of us would have the time to ask the other anything except, what's your source for that? It's pointless. That's not a debate, and that's why scientists don't argue sources and don't ask each other constantly for sources when they debate, because the purpose of a debate is for the benefit of the audience to listen to it and decide whom they think has the truth and make an intelligent decision about it for themselves, or then become inquisitive because of what they heard and go onto the internet, search out information, study what they found, and see which one of the people that they heard is telling the truth. See, so that's what debates are about. It's not about digging around and requiring sources of each other, because it won't get anywhere and it doesn't benefit the audience, which is the purpose of a debate. Do you see my point?
I do see your point. I would just say that this is not quite what I'm asking you for. I'm not asking you if we're going to try and present our differing views of the formation of the Earth's geology. I'm not suggesting you provide sources for that, because the sorts of things that I will be presenting are the things that can be found in most mainstream geology textbooks, and the sorts of things that you'll be presenting will be found in creationist literature and creationist websites and so on. I'm not in the slightest bit bothered about that, because I know that we can't keep challenging each other on things like that. My only problem is that if you are going to present something as evidence, I would like to see your sources for making such claims before the debate. I'm not necessarily saying we need to bring them up during the debate, but I'm saying if you want to say to me the vast majority of fossils are undeformed, or the vast majority of sediments are sorted by granule size, you need to be able to provide numbers which support that, because otherwise I can't see it as a valid argument. And I'm happy to do the same for you.
Yeah. Again, virtually everything that every assertion that either one of us would make in a debate, or is made in debates, is one that somebody could ask, what's your source for that? But it doesn't matter what the statement is. If I didn't say the vast majority, if I even said the strata there is a percentage of strata in the folded strata of mountains, which is sorted by granule size. So you see, all I have to do is prove that one of them is sorted by granule size, and it discredits the uniformitarianist idea
No,
that
it
mountain rose over
doesn't.
millions of years. Yeah, it was one
Absolutely,
single
it doesn't.
strata.
You can get
It does, because that strata, sir, let me finish, because that strata could not have formed over the vast amounts of time that uniformitarianists claim it did, you see.
Oh, well,
Which would have been throughout the entire Cretaceous, period, or whatnot. So you see, if I say that the majority of fossils are not deformed by heat and temperature, and you're asking me for a source for that. First off, it's rather ridiculous, because it's quite clear that that's true. Otherwise, they would be the deformation of fossils would be a prominent subject when discussing the fossils by virtually every scientist that discusses fossils, but it's almost never mentioned, almost never, ever mentioned. No matter what your source is, what university webpage you go to, what scientist, what geologist or archaeologist you ask, they're not going to say, well, deformed fossils, we don't see them very often, they're fairly rare, and they usually occur in such and such a location, because they don't talk about them much, because it's just so few, what's the point?
But,
it's not the majority of the fossils, so why are you going to, why discuss it at any length whatsoever? See what I mean? That's why they don't talk about it much. It's rarely talked about.
Well, frankly, no, I don't. I don't see what you mean.
I think it's really kind of silly, to be honest with you. It's kind of like telling me that, the majority of cars are, if I said the majority of cars, come in different colors. And if you said, no, that's ridiculous, they all come, most of them are blue, or half of them at least are blue. I mean, how ridiculous is that when everybody can see with their own eyes that's not so? I mean, how many photographs of fossils have you examined in your life? Any? Okay, because I've looked at thousands of them. I have yet to see one that's been deformed by heat and pressure. I'm not saying that none exist. I'm saying I've yet to see a photograph of one. So if it were a prominent thing, a common occurrence, it would surely be talked about a lot,
But
that's my point.
If I may continue your example with the cars, you can say that with your own eyes you've seen that cars come in a variety of colours. But then how many cars have you seen in your life? You live in Mississippi State, am I correct?
Let's see if I've looked at 10,000 photographs of fossils, and I can't recall ever seeing one.
Hang on a minute.
Tell you about numbers?
Hang on a minute. You live in Mississippi State, am I correct? I think this is mentioned somewhere in your state. So, and I don't know how much you've been outside of Mississippi State, but it's fair to assume that you've not seen. It's fair to assume that you've not seen all the cars in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair to assume you've not taken a survey and you know how many cars are of one colour and how many cars of another.
It's fair to say that I've been living on this planet 49 years and I've seen hundreds of thousands of cars.
But that doesn't mean that you've seen...
It's also fair to say that I've looked at probably at least a few thousand photographs of fossils, and not recalling having seen one that was presented as distorted by heat and pressure.
But let's say that there is a massive fashion for blue cars in China, and there would be millions of blue cars in China. Because you haven't seen them, it doesn't mean they don't exist.
You know what you're doing? You're asking for evidence of something which is so rare nobody even talks about it. I think that's ridiculous.
That is not. Well, that is one explanation for why nobody talks about it.
Have you ever seen a photograph of a fossil that was deformed by heat and pressure, and where the author or the archaeologist that presented that photograph of that fossil stated so?
I've not seen any in the literature, although I've not read the geological literature.
Have you looked at?
Do you
think you've looked at perhaps 1,000 or more photographs of fossils?
I've seen deformed fossils with my own eyes. I've seen them in the flesh. I've seen them in the field.
Yeah.
I have one.
You have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm going to
deformed by heat.
The rock it's in has been folded, so I don't know whether heat and pressure in conjunction.
Okay,
yes.
That's not deformed by heat. No, I'm talking about deformed by heat.
Well,
because the strata couldn't have been folded. The geologists claim that heat and pressure, not just pressure,
Well,
I had that.
what you have to understand is
I had
that
that discussion that I had a couple of weeks ago with another evolutionist made the ridiculous claim that that the majority of these folded strata in mountains are formed by heat and pressure, and then when pressured about it, he comes back and says, well, it's not necessarily heat, it can be just pressure. See, he's backing off his claim and then making a second claim. Okay, wait a minute, now you can't make up your mind. Is it heat and pressure or is it not? What are the preponderance of geologists of this world say?
well, Neph,
He couldn't make up his mind about it.
do you know what the stable geotherm is?
Look, again, what you're doing is you're positing that because we see lots of evidence of fossils that are not.
That is not what I'm doing.
We don't see we see virtually no fossils that are. That must be somehow evidence that my statement is incorrect. That's almost like punctuated equilibria because we don't have the transitional forms. Therefore, it happened over really fast. Oh, really? What's your source for that? Do you get my point?
Yes, but hang on a minute. Can we take this one thing at a time, please? This is your...
this is turning into a debate over a debate, and it just doesn't interest me. I'm sorry.
I think
you're better off trying to find somebody else to debate.
Can I just clear something up? A few things. I just want to clear up the heat and pressure thing for starters, because that's something that I can explain relatively easily. Now, do you know what the stable geotherm is?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what it is?
The lower crust of the earth.
No. The stable geotherm is the relationship between pressure and temperature as you go deeper down in the earth. And as you go deeper down...
What did I just say? The lower crust of the earth. Right.
But it's not, you're saying that the stable geotherm is a thing. It's a tangible thing. It's not a tangible thing.
I understand, but that's where it exists. So go ahead.
No, it doesn't. It exists everywhere. It exists from the surface of the earth right down to the core. The stable
I would disagree there.
No,
See, I disagree with secular geology right off the bat.
Why? Why do you disagree with this?
Because heat and pressure cannot have created the preponderance of strata, or deformed the preponderance of strata which have been uplifted out of this earth.
But let me just explain this to you. The stable geotherm is the relationship between the pressure and temperature as you go deeper into the earth. And as you go deeper, the pressure increases and so does the temperature. I'm sure you'll agree that temperature and pressure are irretrievably linked together. It's how diesel engines work.
Right.
The heat of combustion comes from compression.
I understand it.
And so when somebody says that rocks were not deformed by heat, they were deformed by pressure alone, they are in many ways wrong. Because as pressure increases, temperature increases. But what remains is that you can heat something to the point where it will undergo a certain amount of flexure without breaking. You can get undeformed strata and not undeformed strata. You can get very gently bent strata and undeformed fossils. But it's when you increase those further, that's when you start to get proper metamorphism. You end up with things like phyllites and schists. So they're talking of when they say it was bent by pressure alone, what they really ought to be saying is they were bent by relatively low temperature and pressure.
Yeah, roughly 500 some odd degrees.
That in geological
which no fossil is going to survive for thousands of years.
Well, why is it not?
Because it's calcium.
What's wrong with that?
It's organic material. It's
not organic.
The calcium, the creature wouldn't exist. Okay, so here's a problem for you. The strata, that creature becomes a fossil. And then it's pushed down, and so you have, now the fossil is mineralized, and it's no longer bone. Right. It gets pushed down, first off, no mechanism known for that. We understand that the continents, buckle up and down a little bit, okay?
I've already told you about this.
Not this possibility that every place on the continent has gone up and down like a plunger in a commode, okay? That's not feasible, okay? No, but, however, let's just assume that the strata were sucked down into the earth and then buried by further strata, okay? Where did the material go that made room for those strata?
Where did the material go? It's still there.
Really?
Yes.
Then how did anything go down on top of it? Are you going to say it got squished out to the sides?
No, I explained this to you. It's a
That would show up in the fossil in the stratification of the Earth as that material got uplifted. We don't really quite see that.
It's a phenomenon known as. I explained this to you. It's a phenomenon known as Aries isostasy. Now, the continental crusts, and I suppose it's, well, the oceanic crust, but we'll talk specifically about the continental crusts. They float, as it were, on the Earth's magma like an iceberg does. So the bit that
they float upon water.
No, they don't float. No, there's no water down there.
Yeah, they do. Seismographic images of the interior of the Earth prove it.
Yes, but what you don't understand is that it is not liquid water. It is not water like it comes out of your tap.
Water saturated rock. I understand it.
But it is not saturated in the form of liquid water. It's in the form of hydrous minerals, which is different.
It's water saturated rock. It's not magma that the continents rest upon.
It's not magma, I agree. It is actually solid rock.
Okay, all right then. We corrected that. But here's the idea. The fossil is now in rock that's supposedly bent and because of heat and pressure.
Hang on a minute. Can we finish this off?
The rock gets deformed, but the fossil does not. You see, it's quite preposterous. If this was what the process that created the mountains, when we dig into these folded strata in the mountains, we should find that the majority of the fossils there had been subjected to heat and temperature, and where we find them in strata which are folded, they should be bent, twisted every which way, contorted by heat, because the fossil itself would have become plastic.
Some of them are.
We don't find that.
We do.
Do you realize how pristine some of the fossils we find in those stratas are? I really don't think you do.
Those which haven't.
Do you realize that on Mount Stevens in Canada, there is millions of Cambrian fossils?
Yes.
Millions of them, okay? They are absolutely pristine, beautiful fossils. They are not deformed by heat and pressure. They're stunning.
Yes, they're lucky. They are lucky to have escaped severe temperature and deformation. I've seen a look.
That's a mountain that was uplifted. So where's the heat and pressure that deformed those strata and pushed them up out of the Earth for 520 million years?
What pushed them up out of the Earth was a process called orogeny, which builds mountains, and it is not responsible for the sort of tight remineralizing kinds of deformation that you are talking about. It does not happen at relatively high temperatures. Now,
the point I'm making is that if the fossils were in the strata, and the strata were deformed by heat and pressure and then uplifted, the fossils in them would be so many of them, the vast majority actually probably would be a very considerable percentage. I'm going to guess perhaps as much as 50% or more, if not 80% or 90% of them, would be deformed by the same process that deformed the strata. But we don't see that. In fact, we find beautiful, undeformed, and often complete fossils in these strata, which in the existence of any, just one really, of a complete, pristine fossil of a creature, of a fish with its skinny, little delicate bones, all of them in place, beautiful, or a fish that's swallowing another fish in that mountain strata that's folded, discredits the idea that mountain strata were folded because of heat and pressure and then uplifted. There wouldn't be any fossils that weren't deformed by heat and pressure. But we don't find that.
They were not folded by heat and pressure in these cases. I know the fish you're talking.
You have a different idea than the preponderance of geologists in the world.
It is not necessarily folding that forms mountains. Now, these.
Pretty much every mountain range in the world has rolled as it was pushed up. So, and there are folded strata in almost every mountain of the Earth.
Well, I don't know. Again, I don't know whether or not that is true.
Well, here you can prove it to yourself. Pull up Google sometime and start looking at pictures of the Pyrenees, the Caucasus, the Rockies.
Are there fossils in Mount St. Helens?
Well, what is Mount St. Helens? A volcano, is it not?
It's still a mountain.
Should we expect to find fossils in it?
No.
Oh, please.
Well,
should we expect to find fossils in it? No, really,
well, actually, possibly.
Okay. Now, fossils are found sometimes in volcanic strata. That is true. They are sometimes. And but I mean, start looking at photographs of these different mountain ranges of the Earth, and you'll see quickly that all the mountain ranges of the earth have folded mountains. All of them. Every one. Every mountain range of the earth has folded mountains. Strata are folded, they're bent, they're twisted.
But not all of them.
The fossils in them don't demonstrate. See?
Not all of them are.
So, not every mountain. No, I wouldn't
not
say
every
every
not
mountain,
every
but
rock.
every mountain range. Every mountain range of the earth has folded strata.
But not all the strata in every mountain are folded.
I didn't say they were. I said
so
all mountain ranges of the earth have folded mountains in them.
So the pristine fossils can exist in those strata in the mountains which haven't been folded. Those which
I'm saying that they exist in the strata which are folded.
Well, there are those which are bent as such. They are curved. They're not tightly
That's
folded.
Called folded strata. Yeah.
Okay, but they have undergone very little deformation. If you
there are some that have gone overgone a lot of deformation, and they have beautiful fossils inside, not distorted by pressure.
Okay, can I give you some homework in that case if you want to substantiate that claim?
I'm not interested in debating a debate.
Well, look,
this is not interesting. Okay.
Can I just ask you to prove your point on this one?
I've just asked you how to prove it to yourself. Well, start looking at photographs of all the mountain ranges.
What I am saying is that pristine fossils do not survive in rocks which have undergone heavy metamorphism.
Hmm.
They do not.
I'm not talking about metamorphic rocks.
That is what is happening when rocks are heated and folded. Yes, it is.
No, I'm not talking about metamorphosized rock.
If you're
I'm talking about folded strata.
Yes.
I'm not talking about rock that's been heated to such a degree that it changes properties to a different kind of rock. Okay, I'm talking about the preponderance of folded strata. Strata which are created by water and can be demonstrated so. Because they still have the sorting.
In order for a strata...
You can still examine the strata and see that it's been sorted by granule size and then folded.
But
so it hasn't been metamorphosed.
But to what degree have they been folded?
All kinds of which ways.
But
some little and tremendously so.
Okay, well, can you provide me an example of a fossil in a rock which has been very tightly folded? I'm not talking about things where the curve is sort of...
Yeah, I know you'd go there.
Well, why is that such an unreasonable request in your position?
Because we don't find the folded strata. Here's a better question. Show me a fossil. Show me pictures of 50 fossils that have been deformed by heat and pressure within a week. If you can find 50, I'll debate you on any subject in the world.
I'll see what I can find for you.
Yeah. No, actually, I take that back. I'm not really interested because here again, you want to start a debate over a debate and you want the debate to be one about sources. Well, I tell you, man, if you and I got in a debate and you started asking me for sources, I would bury you in source requests.
I do not.
Would. You would have so much trouble making one assertion because I would say, wait a minute now, sir, what is the source that demonstrates that? You know, that portion of your assertion, I would bury you in source requests.
You're not understanding what I'm requesting, Neph.
We won't go anywhere if we do that, okay?
That's
not how debates are held.
I don't wish to bring up sources during the debate. However, what I would like to say is it would be nice for the benefit of the audience to provide a list of references at the end that people can look up if they choose, because it's only fair in a scientific matter that people make up their minds based upon the evidence.
Well, you're welcome to do that if you want to.
And I would say that...
But not as part of the debate.
Oh, no,
Because then you're positing because you can provide sources and I didn't bother to provide any that you somehow, what you're positing is science and what I'm positing is not.
It doesn't do a lot of
credibility. Leave the sources claims out, and then we have an honest debate. Let the people be curious enough to go investigate for themselves and see which one of us is telling the truth. That's what debates are for, and that's how they're conducted.
This is not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, I will not stand for you making assertions in the debate which are in any way quantitative. If you want to say the majority or X% or Y% or everyone I've ever seen, these are, first of all, the argument everyone I've ever seen is not a valid argument because you do not have numbers to substantiate it.
Well, gosh, I could make the same claim about you. You say to me that the strata of folded mountains were subducted into the earth and then...
That is different. I am not
And
saying...
can I ask you how many of them? How many?
No, and I can't tell
Well,
you.
I don't have numbers. Right, so don't ask me
No,
the same
but
thing.
you are trying
See
to
my
provide
point?
numbers. You are claiming numbers when you
No.
don't have them.
Mhm.
You
Right,
are
but I can
saying...
ask you the same thing.
You are saying the vast majority of strata are
Okay,
sorted by granule
now
size.
what if what if I ask you a question during the debate? How much of the strata, the enfolded mountains that we see in mountains, were actually deformed by heat and pressure?
I
Would
don't
you be
know.
able to give me a percent? Well, then what's the point in asking me? Because I can
Then
turn it around on you.
what's the point in you making up numbers when you say the
I'm not
vast...
making up. I'm telling you what I believe to be true based upon my personal research
Well, can you
over a
show
period
me
of
your
years.
personal research?
Can you show me yours and I'll show you mine?
I say, open any good mainstream geology textbook.
I've said the same thing, but you don't like it when I say it. Do you see you're being hypocritical?
But there aren't any such things as creationist geology textbooks.
What? I didn't say there was. I said I've discussed secular sources, university websites, and abstracts written by secular
Oh,
archaeologists
no.
and geologists,
Why are
and
you, Neph, why are you still reading the abstract?
the personal websites of geologists and archaeologists themselves who have articles on their websites that describe the geology of the Earth.
You still don't understand. What I am asking you for is if you are going to try and say anything which is in any way quantitative, you are going to try and
You
put
won't,
any kinds of numbers on things. That is
You'll
what
say
I'm
that
asking.
everything I say is quantitative. That's
No,
the
I
point.
won't.
The conversation comes to a grinding halt like it's doing right now. It
What
goes nowhere. Do you not see that?
What I think the debate would be best about would be to outline the different stances on how the geological features that we see today arose. Now, I'll
say this. Let me just interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'll say this, and I'm not going to say it again. Okay? I'm not going to get in a debate where sources are involved because it comes to a grinding halt. Because I'll tell you, I've said this once already. If you start asking me for sources in a debate, I'm going to start taking apart every single assertion you make.
And I have
and
told
ask you for a source for if you make an assertion that's 30, 50 words long, I'm going to ask you a source every 10 words because you're going to make some portion of that 50-word assertion is going to make a statement within itself. And I'm going to ask you for a source for it. And I'll ask you for so many sources, the conversation will come to a grinding halt.
And I have already said that I will not ask for sources during the debate. That is a given because it doesn't help the audience. What I want to say is that you are in no position to make statements during the debate in which you say something like the vast majority of strata are sorted by granule size. It is not the fact that they are sorted by granule size that I object to. Some strata are. What I am objecting to is the fact that you have the authority to say that the vast majority are, and you cannot provide numbers to substantiate that.
And I could ask you the same question and lead you into the same thing.
Well, what have I said?
When creationist scientists and evolutionist scientists debate each other, they don't ask each other for quantitative sources and to substantiate their claims with
They exchange sources before the debate.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
They don't discuss sources during the debate.
Not during the debate, but they will swap
They don't
notes
ask
beforehand.
you quantify that with a source. If you say such and such is true, because each one could go back at the other with the same spiel, and the conversation comes to a halt. The debate doesn't go anywhere.
You don't understand.
Don't you see that? You really can't get this?
I really understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that you cannot throw assertions out there based upon numbers.
Well, then don't make any assertions yourself for debate, because I'll tear you to pieces.
I have not made any...
If you want me to apply the same requirements that you're trying to apply to me, I'll tear you to pieces.
I have not made any assertions based upon numbers. That is my objection. Do you understand?
Numbers? It won't have to be numbers. I can ask you how you can qualify any of the things that you say.
But you've said the vast majority
every tiny little thing you say, I can ask you to qualify.
Look,
I can ask you to qualify.
Yes, you've made this point. Thank you, Neph.
Well, then why don't you get it?
Because you are not understanding what it is I am asking of you.
No, I do understand. You're not grasping that either one of us could ask the other to substantiate with a source every tiny little thing that we say and make state in any of our assertions, and we would end up going nowhere. That's not what a debate is. That's not what debates are for. That's not how they're conducted.
All right, then can I just try and make this as clear as I can, that during the debate you are not allowed to use phrases like the vast majority or every single or the vast preponderance of.
Okay, you want to go there. All right, well, let's say you want to do that. Okay, then I would have to say, likewise, that you are not allowed to say that the strata were subducted and then deformed by heat and pressure. You would have to quantify how much.
Am I allowed to say?
If you're going to make a claim, because the statement the strata did alludes that all of them did. You see, unless you do others, unless you qualify it otherwise.
Would I be allowed to say?
So that would mean you couldn't even posit that they did. You see what I'm saying?
Would I be allowed?
Conversation.
Neph, calm down. Would I be allowed to say some strata in that situation?
Would I be allowed to? You're telling me no.
The word some, which does not imply in any sense the proportion.
It doesn't.
Apart from it being more than none. Some does not imply any particular number.
It posits more than a few and less than the majority.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't.
Boy, you need to take an English class, young man. I'm sorry to put it quite so plainly.
All right, shall we look up the definition of some?
You see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This kind of thing that you're wanting to do that you're doing right now. That's what would happen to the debate, and it will go nowhere.
The definition of some...
Based upon what I'm seeing now, I'm going to have to turn down your offer to debate, because what you're wanting to do is create an argument in which both of us are required to substantiate every little thing we say. That is not what debates are. Debates are that the one makes their case, regardless of their assertions, whether they're preposterous, whether they're true, whether somebody is believable in someone's mind, or someone else looks at it and says, you know what, that makes perfect sense to me, I can see the truth in that, or not. Both sides do the same thing in debate. It's up to the audience to decide who has the truth, to become inquisitive and go away from the debate with a curiosity that leads them to investigate on their own if they must. That is the purpose of debate. That's what it's for, the benefit of the audience. I'm perfectly happy with any opponent in a debate making any assertion that they like to. And I can respond to that by saying that's completely absurd and I can offer my own. The audience is welcome to hear what I have to say and say, you know what, that's crap. I don't believe what he's saying. The first guy was right. That's perfectly well and good, because that's what the audience is there to do, to make their own decision, their own choice about what they've heard and who is telling the truth, who has the most truth in what they're in their assertions. Okay, but what you're wanting to do is get into an argument about what the debate is, and you're wanting to quantify everything that we did. Now, I'll say, if in a debate, if you pulled that tactic on me, I would bury you in requests for sources.
All right,
I would ask you to qualify every tiny thing you said, and the conversation will come to a grinding halt. Okay?
All right, then. So I'm willing to concede that. I'm willing to concede that. Sorry, you don't need to continue. You don't need to continue. Okay. I am willing to concede that in the debate you are allowed to go and make whatever assertions you like, and I am allowed to counter them.
I understand. I'm just not really interested. From what I've seen already, I'm just not interested.
But when you say...
I have friends paging right now, so I do need to go. I don't want to be rude. I was a little rude to you earlier, for which I apologize, because I am a gentleman. I tried to be. But I do need to go, because I'm being paged by about 6 people right now.
Can I just make a couple of very quick things before you go? 1 minute, honest, 60 seconds?
Sure. Okay.
I would say that in the debate, you're allowed to make whatever assertions you like, and I am allowed to correct them. My only concern is that unless we are allowed to back them up, people won't know which to believe. So it would be nice if we can provide some sources that people can look at in their own time after the debate. The other thing I would like to say is that if you are still interested in this, I will organise a text chat at some point with other people involved in the organisation, and so we can arrange a time and a date.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I,
at this point, I don't feel like I'm interested in debating with you because of what I've seen already. I would just prefer somebody who's a little more open-minded, a little more understanding that debate is for people to make assertions and rebuttal to it, and the audience is to choose. But so at this point, I'm going to say thank you for the offer, and politely decline.
okay, I'll tell everyone you were too chicken.
Yeah. Well, do what you like.
That's all right. Thank you.
I'm
Good
sorry.
night.
Good night.